Okay, friends, today we are reviewing the book A Testament of Steel. It's by Davis Ashura. It was a pretty great book. I didn't really expect it to be. I hadn't heard much about it, but it got pretty great ratings, so we'll go over those. As far as the ratings just for the book, we have uniqueness, character development, the secondary characters, and a utility rating. For fantasy, it's the magic system. And then we'll have two ratings that are just based off of the audiobook alone. So specifically how the narrator performs. So we have dynamic voicing and vocal cast. Okay, so to start off with, we have uniqueness. This book is like a lot of other fantasy books. The main character comes in, has some special characteristics that give him an advantage over his peers, and falls in love with someone, or maybe falls in love with someone that is a little bit outside of his ballpark per se. That's going to add a little bit of extra tension into the book, and so that's not ultra unique. I would say that the combat style, the way that the magic is portrayed in the system, and potentially even how the main character and some of the secondary characters are brought into this world does set them apart some. So I gave it a 3.5 on that particular rating. Then we have character development. On this, I feel like the book really shines, where some books the character becomes ultra powerful, ultra fast, and you have to provide overwhelmingly crazy villains and scenarios to combat that. The main character in this book grows strong, but not overly strong, has a very steady progression throughout the book to keep you entertained, but also give you some places where in his magic and in culture and in his intellect, there's a lot of places that he can grow in future books. And even in combat, even though he does gain a very strong mastery in comparison to his peers in that area. Next, we have secondary characters. I also gave it a 5 in secondary characters. The reason for that is that in this book, the author does something that I really appreciate. He allows us to get into the mind of some of the other characters, some of their likes and dislikes, some of their struggles, without spending too much time from their perspective. He's not spending hours and hours from person to his perspective when I really want to be following the main character. And so I feel like we get a really good mix of that in this book. And then the magic system has a little bit of a low rating. It's the first book in a series. The rating I gave it was 3.5 out of 5. It's not that the magic system was bad per se, but in this book the focus was combat, and the main character was not provided a ton of insight into the magic system until we get into the late end of the book. And although it is intriguing and unique what we have heard so far, I feel like that's going to be explored a lot in future books. And so that only has a 3.5 out of 5, but I wouldn't stop that. I wouldn't let that stop you from reading the book, because it is excellent. And then on to the last two categories, dynamic voicing. So for this book, we have Nick Podehl, which is a fantastic narrator. And so, true to form, he gets a 5 for dynamic voicing. Is what I mean by that is that whenever the main character has an emotion, he's serious, he's angry, he's stunned, you can tell by the tone that the narrator gives to that voice that the character feels that way. You don't have to be told by the author. You can interpret it just by the tone that the narrator provides. So that's why he gets a 5 for dynamic casting. And for vocal casting, I gave him a 4 and the vocal cast, I gave him a 4.5 out of 5. This could be a very debatable choice. I feel like there are a lot of characters in this first book, and with that being said, it's really hard to get very distinctive vocal cast for each individual character. And so a true 5 would mean that, every time he used a different voice, I knew which character it was without having to be told. But there were a couple of times with some of the different races that the characters would blend together. I would need clues from the book to know who it was. I couldn't just tell from the voice alone. I feel like he did a great job. Like every race had one or two characters that you could distinguish. So it wasn't just like, oh, all of the dwarves sound the same or elves sound the same. But there were a couple from each race that you couldn't distinguish. And so that's why I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. A very excellent job for the size of the cast. And so the book portion got 4.25. The narrator was 4.75. The overall was 4.4 out of 5. And so for the first of a series, I feel like this is very well done. You can definitely tell that the goal of this book was to write more. It wasn't just a one-off that he was seeing like, oh, let's just test the waters. Let's see how it works. This book is excellent. Some side notes, some things I just like to provide. As far as an age rating goes, the book does have a fair bit of violence, some choice cuss words, so nothing that you're probably a young adult reader hasn't heard. There's nothing overtly sexual in this book, and so it'd be an easy listen. It would be an easy listen for anyone that's young adult and above. The book leans a little bit more towards the serious side instead of the humorous side. That doesn't stop it from being a great book, but depending on what you're looking for, that's probably something that should be noted. There is a small amount of romance in the book, although I feel like he's leaving a lot more for following books in the series. And if you're looking for an action book, this would be a book for you. It is all about combat in book 1, all about getting better, faster, stronger, and that's the heart of this book. And I would say there is some gore, but not excessive, in the sense that the author does a good job of helping you visualize exactly what the main character is doing, but not to a grotesque standpoint. So if the main character potentially broke someone's wrist, but he doesn't describe bones breaking out of the wrist or anything like that. Just descriptive enough for you to be able to build the picture in your own mind. And so in general, this was a fantastic book, and I would definitely recommend it for anyone that's listening to fantasy books.